Our bridge town, jewel in our crown, worldwide renowned, from Garrison to Kensington. This meeting place, this melting pot, this entry point for the builders of our nation. Historic bridge town and its garrison. Big it up. Our military, we celebrate for centuries of history. Big it up. Tradition and culture, our heritage. Historic bridge town and its garrison.
Good evening and welcome. As the Division of Culture celebrating Heritage Month, we are having our youth with us this evening, and they'll be having their say as we discuss heritage and sustainable development. Pleasant good evening to those of you joining us online, and I'll get straight into it. We have 3 students of the University of the West Indies joining me this evening, and I want to welcome you guys. But first of all, what I'm going to do is going to allow you to introduce yourselves to those thousands upon thousands of people who are there in land with us this evening. So I'm going to start off with Tiffany. It's over to you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Tiffany Murray. I am a young entrepreneur and student, and I have completed my associate degree in sociology and law, a bachelor's degree in law, and soon to complete my legal education certificate. I've always had a love for working with the youth from a very young age. I have been a part of youth organizations such as Youth Path and also a youth leader at my church. I best describe myself as resilient and optimistic, always ready and willing to embrace new opportunities, challenges, and to learn new things. My motto in life is try. Even if it doesn't work, at least you've put your best foot forward. And with such motto, I encourage the youth to always give up their best, to remember to always get up and life will do the rest. I became a volunteer at the Culture of Division, and from participating in Heritage Month, I started to form a deep love for culture and heritage, and how important it is to conserve our heritage and educate the youth of our culture and heritage. And that's me.
Thank you, Tiffany, and welcome on board. You know, as you said, it is so important that we get our young people involved in preserving and also in establishing new things as we go along. So I'm going to go over to Sophia now. Sophia, welcome.
Hi, welcome. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. My name is Sophia Lee. I am a cultural practitioner. I have a passion to work with young people, especially from the area of the community with the working class people. So I use arts and education, preferably dance, to help engage the young people in positive activity, and I am a role model for them. I am also a student at UWI. My major is in dance and minor in theater, and I will soon be pursuing a master's in creative arts.
Awesome. Welcome. Thank you so very much. And let's go now to Keisha, who is all bubbly and smiling. Tell us how you got started and introduce yourself to our lovely audience out there.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Keisha Dorridge, and I too am a student at the University of the West Indies in creative and performing arts, majoring in dance and minoring in film. I am also a proud member of Dance in Africa, and I also hold an associate degree in dance. I have represented Barbados both regionally and internationally, and I am excited about giving back to society through dance and teaching kids and empowering them. So thanks for coming.
All right. So just to let everyone know, these 3 young ladies with me this evening have been volunteers for the Division of Culture in the Prime Minister's office with the responsibility for culture. They have been giving of their time on various projects that have been going on, and I must say that they've been doing a fantastic job. This evening, we're going to talk a little bit and discuss heritage and sustainable development. There are a number of questions that I'm going to ask you guys, And I want you to feel free to express yourselves as you see fit. Don't worry about it. No, I'm the old man in this crowd this evening. So, young people, I want you though to seriously think about where we go. How do we manage it? How does it impact on you as young people? And so we're going to dive right in. First question is this. I always ask this question to Barbadians, and oftentimes I get such a wide array of answers. It's unbelievable. So the question is, what makes you a Barbadian? And I'm going to start with Sophia first. What makes you a Barbadian, Sophia? What separates you from the rest of the world?
Fantastic. Listen, language, our Bajan language is important because it is unique, and also the food that we eat, especially in season like Independence time, the conkeys, and not just eating the conkeys, being able to take part in the making of it, swinging the leaves, you know, and those type of things make me a Bajan. From the time I start to speak, everybody would be like, "Oh, she from Barbados," and I'm proud of that. So those things are the things that would jump out, taking part in the making of the conkeys, swinging the leaves, not just eating the language. That makes me a Bajan, a proud one at that.
Of course, and emphasis on being proud is an important part of it. Understandable where the language is concerned. I'll tell you a little story about that a little later on. But I'm going to go to Keisha now and let her tell the whole world, Keisha, what makes you a Barbadian?
What makes me a Bajan? That's a very, very good question. I would say for me, echoing some of Sophia's sentiments about the food and our dialect, the way we speak, to add to that is also our body manipulations, the way we walk up, the way we move is for me is very artistically creative, and is we know that Trinis they do a little wine, but the vernacular of the Bajan walk up is beautiful, and that is one of the things that really really makes me a Bajan, along with children's games.
Mm-hmm.
Playing hand games.
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's something
Right.
very, very, very in tune to our culture. Like it takes me back to when I was a child and my experiences pitching marbles. I was kind of like a tomboy, but that's okay. Pitching marbles, playing hand games, and going through that whole aspect as a child, even in my adulthood. It's a beautiful thing.
All right. I was interested to. So I think I lost you there for a little bit, Keisha. So I'm hoping that we can get back the sound. I lost you a little bit there. But it was interesting to hear you talk about the hand games, because when I move around Barbados, it seems as if a lot of those things are disappearing. And as young people, it really is going to be up to you guys to be able to revive those things and to pass them on to the next generation. But I'm going to go to Tiffany now and not and get a sense of what it is, as you see it, that makes you distinctively Barbadian.
Okay, I agree with Sophia. What I think makes me a Barbadian, or I like to say a Bajan, is our dialect. Also, our customs, especially as it relates to food. Barbadians wholeheartedly believe that every Saturday we have to get pudding and sauce. From Friday
Mm-hmm.
and Thursday, orders are being put in for pudding and sauce, and Saturday people are lined up. Additionally, it's as though we have certain days to do certain things. So on Saturday mornings are special for Bridgetown, where we do most of our shopping, and then we get to Sunday. Although it's not our national days, 9 out of 10 households are having macaroni pie, rice, stew, coleslaw, and chicken. And they cannot forget the games of dominoes. And to me, that is what makes me a Bajan.
All right. So we've looked at a number of things. We've looked at the games. We've looked at the game. Okay, so we've looked at the games, we've looked at the food, we've looked at dance, we've looked at these aspects of it. One of the interesting things, ladies, is that regardless of what, there's no secret that oftentimes these tangible and intangible aspects of our culture are sometimes lost in the society or even replaced or removed at some point because culture is not stagnant. And I think a lot of people don't understand that it's not stagnant and that, it's dynamic and it changes as we go from one generation to the next, even though we attempt to hold on to some of those things. The things that we do hold on to, the making of the pudding and sauce in itself and the eating of it, the dance, the language, even as I said earlier, these things are changing. I want to ask you as young people, how can young people use these aspects of our heritage? It could be for business. It could be just for their own self-development as barbarians. It could be to impact on their communities. But I want you to tell me as young people, how do you see it? And I'm going to start with Keisha with this one.
I'm happy that you started with me because if you didn't, then I would have asked, can I take this one first? But for
Awesome.
me, it's more about incorporation and more or less a fusion. So I always go back to the example of the Barbados landship. We know that this is indigenous to Barbados, but we find that a lot of young people, for whatever reason, do not gravitate towards this technique. And you have other Caribbean islands who have their indigenous dances, but when we think of fusion, incorporating and creating new stuff, there's always the foundation of what is important to them coming out of the movements. And it makes it more authentic because you're using your foundation to create something new. So, from my personal experience, I found that we don't, young people, us, don't necessarily utilize that part of our vernacular enough. And seeing that would solidify that we are maintaining our ground. And with that maintenance, we are also branching off and developing and recreating and just putting stuff out there.
So Keisha, there's a social aspect also involved with the landship, not just the dance, but it was also the whole idea of being able to help those persons who couldn't help themselves in the society due to being, in a state of poverty. That in itself gave us things like meeting turns and cooperatives and these types of things back in those days. How do you see the landship still being able to contribute in that aspect of it for the society?
Um, what I find one of the things that would have to, as a community, we would have to first establish is a level of trust, because I believe that back then there was more trust within community and people, so that if you decided to do a mihin or susu, then you're trusting a particular person and you're trusting your money, your funds. And today, the financial aspect of given it is more strenuous than it was before, because we have a lot of factors to come into place. So for me, I believe that that level of trust has to be established where that is concerned. And once we have established that trust, then we could then go into, okay, so let's do this for someone who is less fortunate. Let's hold a $20. It does not have to be $100 because not everybody can afford $100. It can be a $10, but you got $10, you got 10 people, you got $100, and we keep that rolling so that I get this. Okay, you're able to take that fund and go to the supermarket and buy some stuff for your kids, for yourself, and then you pay it back, and then the rotation keeps happening. For me personally, I find that that's so we can start to regain our trust within the community as individuals and rebuild these aspects of our culture that kind of have fallen by the wayside.
Thank you
I
very
want to
much.
just chip in
So,
there.
right,
Yeah,
go
I
right
just
ahead.
want to chip in there because we're missing that common unity that Keisha is speaking about. That common unity, maybe because technology has taken over most of our young people. Everybody is into social media. So if we have that common unity where communities will come together, some of those challenges we'll be able to alleviate.
I know growing up as a youngster, for me, when I first came to Barbados in 1970, one of the things that struck me was that community spirit where people were able to take care of each other. And that whole African proverb about a village raising a child was very prevalent at that particular point in time. And I believe that the landship, in the way that it brought the communities together, getting young people and old people involved in it, would have been a part of that economic enfranchisement, so to speak, in being able to help people to build homes, to buy food, to purchase land, to do little things that they needed to do to improve themselves. So I'm with you on that. But I'm going to go now to Tiffany to get your view and how do you see us being able to use these aspects of our heritage and our culture to develop ourselves?
Okay, I'm going to discuss. I think young people can use it for an economic gain. Um,
Mhm.
Especially graphic designers. I personally know of a brand called Hard Agent. And to me, it's not only an economic gain for the owner, but also for Barbados as a whole. And persons may be like, Barbados as a whole? Well, yes.
Mhm.
So imagine you're in a different country and you've never heard of Barbados and you see somebody wearing Hard Agent. First of all, you'll want to know what is hard Bajan and what makes a Bajan hard. So therefore, this creates curiosity, which creates awareness. And you also have other brands such as Creative Carving, who could carve anything that you can imagine from the flying fish back down to any old technology. And imagine tourists or even a young person seeing these old carvings of, for example, the steel iron. Again, it creates awareness and knowledge. Also, for filmmakers, I can remember growing up hearing the folklore about Ossie. Imagine if a
Mhm.
group of young people had to come together to create it as a Bajan comedy. Again, they'll be able to use museums, show murals, and again, this creates, yes, economic gain, but also awareness.
Awesome. I see where I don't know if you guys are beginning to say from you've said in terms of the movies. If you look at what Tyler Perry was able to do with his Medea character, it really was using the I could say the moral standards and the behaviors of people of the past to create this character that's lending the wisdom of those back then in today's world. So I can see exactly where you're going with that. But Sophia, I'm going to give you the opportunity now to give us your take on that same question. You know, how can young people use this heritage to their advantage?
Yes. I am strongly motivated by being patriotic. And what I like is when people go outside of Barbados and represent our country, because then we get to use some of these same aesthetic features, to showcase our Barbadian culture, especially when we go like to Carrie Festa. That's a perfect example because you have the visual arts, then you have the performing arts and dance, and those same aspects we use, and it can also gain funding for tourism for our country.
Awesome. You know, it's interesting that we talk about the language, and I want to just divert just a little bit here where the language is concerned. There is a continuing debate in Barbados as we speak that suggests that what we call the Barbarian vernacular, the Barbadiana, or the dialect, as some people would like to call it, that it has no place in Barbados at all. And for me, as a person who was actually born in England, I find it beautiful. I find it so rhythmic and so different and descriptive. We've lost a lot of the words over the years, but very descriptive, and it's a form of communication. And for me, language is about communicating and who it is that you're speaking to, and what is it you want them to understand. So I'm gonna pose this question to you guys: how do you see us balancing the idea of language as being part of our culture and heritage, whereas another section of the society sees it as something to be done away with or to be thrown away because it's not proper English? Anyone can feel free to answer.
Okay, so I'm gonna go. Um, you use the perfect word, balance. I believe there has to be balance in everything we do, and even though the debate is saying, "Oh, it's not standard English," we still need to be able to speak standard English, but the language, our dialect, is a part of us. When tourists come from England, they don't want to come to hear us putting on an accent. They want to hear us speaking in our authentic tongue. They want to hear the dialect. They want to hear so that they can say, can you repeat? Excuse me, what are you saying? It's beautiful. Similarly to other Caribbean countries, they don't lose their dialect, but they still speak standard English. So for me, we need to find the balance and be able to allow that skill to, again, come to the correct place where both of them can exist in the same realm. Because if we take away our dialect, then we are taking away a big part of who we are as a people. And I mean, I don't believe that other islands are thinking about taking away that part of them. It's like telling me I can't eat cuckoo and flying fish for independence, or I can't have conquest. Excuse me? No, that cannot work. We need to keep these things close to us and protect them because they need protecting. And by protecting them, we preserve them. And we're also able to teach our children. And by passing on that information, they can teach their children. And then the generation of keeping this a part of our culture and our heritage alive goes on forever. And that's just my 2 cents.
Well, thank you very much, Keisha. Um, anyone else wanting to come in at this point?
Yeah, I totally
Yeah.
agree. I totally agree with you, Keisha, 100%. I've been in places with scenarios where tourists was very excited about, according to them, the bread and two with cheese. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And people hold on on hook lines like the reverse back and turning, lowering down the TV and those type of things. It may
Mm-hmm.
seem to persons as though as if it is being backward, but don't forget about what Kamau said, our great Kamau, that we should not lose our native tongue. Why should we have to change our native tongue? It is very important to us.
Right, and I agree that there's a need for a balance. Like recently, I went to Space Town, and there were these older persons in the restaurant that I was at, and I enjoyed hearing this man speaking. I mean, his dialect was so good, and for me as young people, because we're constantly, as I agree with you, as because we're constantly being told that we should speak proper English. It's forcing us to lose the dialect, and there's certain words that the older folks will use, like they will use words like all, I mean like you oughta, you understand? And it's very unique to us, and even our dialect always call for a conversation on Twitter. Other Caribbean countries are always debating our dialect, whether they think that is ugly or whether they think that is beautiful. Like, I believe that it is balanced. You should not frown down on a person for using their dialect, and we are losing it actually, but I think it should be preserved.
All right. You guys are probably gonna hold some licks after this after this session is finished, but prepare yourselves. Question for you guys though. I mean, like, but let me just make this statement before I ask that question. For those persons who are very adamant about the whole idea of standard English should be spoken at every juncture of your life, some of them need to take a trip to what you would call Cockney country in England and try to decipher what those people are saying, and then come back home and see if they hold the same viewpoint about standard English as communication, as opposed to what they may encounter in that part of the world. But as young people, my question to you now is, in your mind, why should heritage be important to young people? And I want to hear from young people. What do you think it should be? It is important. And Tiffany, since you were the last one to say, I'll let you start on this one.
Yes, please. I think heritage is important to young people because it allows us to know where we've come from and our humble and resilient beginnings. It gives us a sense of identity and pride, but at the same time, it's humbling. It shows us how privileged we are and how far we've come. And it was only recently I had an experience which showed me the importance of passing on our heritage. I was home and the electricity went off and I was panicking, but then I remembered that in crisis, my grandparents are always there. So I called my grandmother and I said, Granny, I pressing and the electricity gone off. Granny told me, Tiffany, turn on the stove, put the iron on the stove, get cloth,
Mm-hmm.
put it over your clothes and press it. And hence, although the technology has improved, she was still able to assist me using an old method which was used with the steel iron. So although so knowing the old way of doing things is still relevant and important today.
Awesome, 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 awesome. And it goes back again to the passing on of knowledge from one generation to the next. Sophia?
Hi. Those precious moments, Tiffany, those precious moments are very important, very important. So I was there listening and I was saying I had a similar experience. I didn't have to light though, but it's like you remember that you can use the candle. You remember that you don't necessarily have to go to the refrigerator to do things, that you can store your things according to the older people in the larder. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you remember that there are things that you could have used that would at least hold you until you can do better, as opposed to being stressed and worried about your current situation.
Great, 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 great. But in your mind, Sophia, um, why is it important that this heritage should be, preserved by our young people, or even taught to them?
It is important because then they will be able to pass whatever they learn down. I teach currently. I'm a member of Haynesville Youth Club, and I like Keisha. I use certain dances and stuff, and I go back and I teach the students, and now my students become teachers and they pass on that information. So that is really good for the development and sustainability.
Awesome, awesome. Keisha?
Yes, please. Um, for me is important because I believe if you don't know where you come from, you necessarily can't know where you're going. It might not make sense to everybody, but I can try to make it make
Mhm.
sense. Um,
Right.
having that information of how to do things that our grandparents and ones before us would have been able were doing, and then passing that information on to us, it arms us with knowledge to survive in unfavorable times. Like I could only speak from my experience or a shared experience. And for instance,
Mhm.
if my gas run out and I can't get to the gas station, I know to light a fire. My grandmother made sure she was like, you gotta know to light a fire because if you don't have any gas and you need to make a meal, you light a fire
Mhm.
and you prepare your meal
Mhm.
outside. And that
Mhm.
is something that her mother would have taught her, and then she instilled that in me, and I'm gonna instill that in my daughter and my nieces because at the end of the day, that activity becomes a family activity. You're also learning; it becomes a family activity, and they get to see and learn and be infused into this whole process that they did not born into because they would not have had that experience. They only know the glitz and the glamour. They don't know like the nitty gritty of how to get things done or how things were done back then. So it makes that information passing on to them, for me, makes them more appreciable about what they have. And by having that appreciation for what they currently have, then they're able to be more mindful going forward, and not so selfish but become selfless individuals.
You guys have just triggered something in my mind, and I'm going to go a little bit off of my script, so to speak, but to deal with this particular aspect. Now, you mentioned the whole idea of using, the fire to do your cooking. If electricity goes off, back in the day, a lot of our older people had what we call a smart lamp, which was a bottle with some kerosene and some paper pushed down inside it or something, and they would light that, and that would give them light. But in terms of, let's say, for instance, we have intangible heritage, we have tangible heritage, and we also have natural heritage. And one of the things that I knew and I noticed first coming to Barbados is that almost every house within where I lived at that time, you could find either some sort of fruit tree, either a mango tree, a ackee tree, a gooseberry tree, a cherry tree. There was always something there. People kept chickens or guinea birds or cows or sheep. There were always things there that they could eat. Today, we find a lot of people complaining about high prices in supermarkets for vegetables and all these things. But even our prime minister has been encouraging people over and over again, the Ministry of Agriculture, to go back to what would have been a part of our quote unquote culture, planting our own food. How do you see this, or how do you view this as young people as being part of that sustainability drive? And I open it to anyone who wants to go first.
I'll go first. The kitchen gardening was always a thing of the past. In you go to your garden and you pick your fresh herbs, but that no longer happened. But actually, COVID has done kind of a drastic turnaround because the like you said, the supermarket stuff was just gouging skyrocket, and persons were like, I better go, there's nothing to do, everybody home, plant my own food so that I will be able to go to my garden and get some. So you will find that a lot of people start back the kitchen garden because of that, that harsh experience. So that took me all the way back. Though that those are some of the things that we should hone, that kitchen garden. And because our ancestors use agriculture, they used to have the staples, used to go and pick peas and be shelling the peas and stuff like that around Christmas time. Go in the garden, pick a little thyme, a little parsley, marjoram, to flavor the pot, the fresh herbs.
Mhm.
So you don't have to buy those things from the supermarket where they're so expensive.
Awesome. Tiffany?
Oh, okay,
Yes.
no problem.
I grew up in the country, so I am accustomed to seeing the bright fruit trees, the kitchen gardens,
Right.
but then recently I moved to a more developed part,
Mhm.
and that is non-existent. But to say because it's a more developed area, there's still ways in which we can do this. This is like cutting the half cans to create your little garden. So although we are not, some of us are moving to more developed parts, there's still ways to do this, and I think it's very important. I grew up around pigs. I grew up knowing the importance of raising animals, knowing the importance of planting. On Saturdays, I knock at my grandmother's door, look, here for this bright fruit, you understand? So I think that although we may not be able to plant the bright fruit tree, we could still do small crops in cans. So that is a suggestion I would suggest to the persons living in a more developed area to keep going with agriculture, keep going with the livestock.
Got you. All right. Keisha?
Yes, please. Um, I want to disagree with Sophie a little bit. She was saying that it's a thing of the past. I'm a
Mm.
country bumpkin. I grew up in the country where my backyard was a gully and I could have tracked down there and we same like Tiffany had all the fruit trees around me. We had
Yep.
livestock. So I grew up embedded in that experience. And then we moved to a more residential area. But that
Mhm.
part of my experience, I did not live in the country. I can tell you that my house is surrounded by fruit trees. Like my mother has planted bright fruit, plantain, pawpaw, soursop, sweet potato, guava, chives, and the list goes on. So much so that if I have an abundance in something, I can give to somebody else. So for me, I don't want to say that relocating should kind of take you away from that. You should still be able to take a bit of something with you. It's like me having a group of people as friends. I'm gonna take what I want, the benefits from each individual to kind of add to what I have within myself already created. So like Tiffany said, you could do a little herb garden. You gotta get your little chives, your little marjoram, your thyme. You could start with that. You could plant a breadfruit, not a breadfruit, sorry, a banana tree, because you don't have to water it every single day. But once you get a banana sucker, it's gonna take to the earth, and you will get 100 bananas to probably feed your family and a couple other families.
Awesome. Totally agreed with you, ladies. Totally agreed. We're going to move on. There's built heritage. And if we're talking about sustainability, there are a lot of structures around Barbados that oftentimes are just left there to basically go into a state of decay. What is your take on us being able to preserve, conserve, preserve, and in some instances, refurbish those structures that could go back into use and help us to meet our sustainability goals? Keisha?
Yes, please. For me, I would say that the conservation of these age buildings would be extremely important, as they will also give those involved and outside of that activity, uh, a- it will create a connection. um it would help us to again go back to our history, or at least have some knowledge of what the building represented then, and then through that restoration, what it would represent now and for the future. So for me, I believe that and I see a lot of old buildings. There's probably several reasons why they've been not used, but start a project and to get that up and running, I think that would be a very good thing.
Fantastic. Thank you, Keisha. All right, I'm going
You're
to go to
welcome.
Sophia.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with Keisha, but especially sustainability on the chattel houses. A lot of the chattel
Mhm.
houses we could refurbish, to help with some of our historic. There's a reason why they were called chattel houses. They were called chattel houses because you could have moved them from one place to the next.
Yes.
In the
Mhm.
in the past, we did not own the land. We didn't own the land at all. So we had to pack up
Right.
and go if we couldn't afford. And those charter houses are significant. They were built a specific way so that they will have, the water would run off one side. And to preserve that for our history, I think it would be good to have those charter houses sustain like what they would have done at Rock Hall.
Mhm. Do you think it would also be valuable in terms of the technology of actually constructing that type of movable home? Because I am not sure if I have ever seen anything like that in other parts of the world. And it may be something that we will want to look into. And as we are grappling with being able to house people in Barbados, it might be a good chance or opportunity for us to use or to reuse that technique and also that design for combating our housing problem at this point in time. But I'll go on to Tiffany, and I'm eager to hear from you.
Yes, for me, I think that all Barbadians have a role in heritage conservation, from the youngest to the oldest. And to tell you what my panelists were saying, I would say that education is the most important for heritage conservation. So before we get to preserving the chattel holes and placing the antiques in museums and tourism, we first have to educate our own. Yes, I understand that time is going and culture is a moving and living instrument, but there are some things that are so unique to us that they should not be overlooked or buried. We cannot ask people to conserve something they do not know the importance of or value of. And the beautiful thing about education is not that it's not only book based. This way, once the youth of today are educated and know the importance, then their need to conserve their heritage will flow naturally and spill over to future generations. And ways in which we can do this, for example, Heritage Month, is about making people aware and educating them so that they will see the charter holes and be like, wow, this is so unique to Barbados and we need to keep this because they've been educated about it. So for me, education is the first thing that we need to do. And I think that events such as Heritage Month can do this for the youth.
Thank you very much. So, as my timer is telling me that we are getting very close to being out of time, I'm just going to check in with Samuel to make sure that. Okay, okay. Thank you so much. So, let's push on a little bit. And the next question is, what recommendations would you guys make to ensure that heritage is preserved for future generations? Or what more do you think can be done to ensure the longevity of heritage for future generations? And I'm open it to anyone who wants to go first.
I feel like what Tiffany said about education, it has to start with the curriculum. And
Mhm.
I don't know how it is structured currently, but based on when I was going to school and I did history, I was not taught about anything related to my own history, I was taught about other history. So for me, I believe once it starts there and we are able to get that and become a part of the curriculum, then we could start the process of educating our youth, and it transpires through all the other stages of life. And for me, once you learn something and by learning it, you make it fun and interesting, there are certain aspects of it that you don't forget. So you'll be carrying that piece of history with you throughout your life. You'll be able to apply certain aspects of your knowledge to experiences that you may have, or experiences that other people that you're related to um, may encounter. So for me, that's where it starts. That's where it should start.
Thank you so much, Keisha. I
You're welcome.
know for sure that the National Cultural Foundation has been doing a fantastic job in being able to put on some programs in the communities which were passing on certain things. So they had things like joinery and pottery and different aspects of our heritage that they have been bringing in. Uh, I would say the last remaining group of practitioners of these things, and trying to pass on that knowledge in a complete different way. But Sophia, I'm going to ask you that same question. What would you recommend that should be done to preserve and to also, ensure that this heritage is passed on, this knowledge from that point, but that the appreciation of the things that are ours stays with our younger people or future generations?
Well, of course, I agree with the Palinist in terms of the education, but I'm going to also look at a cultural approach, because we need to sustain, for instance, the landship. We need to have more stilt walkers. We need to have the fire eating. All of those creative things we need to have. So I'm thinking that a national school of creative arts, so we could have more artists coming together doing workshops, because a lot of these things are, I cannot tell you when last I've seen or heard about the steel donkey. So,
Mm-hmm.
from a cultural perspective, we need to do more work within our communities, and we also need to have the community involved with school, so that we could preserve our culture.
Folklore is at risk of being lost, and I'm interested that you mentioned that, Sophia, in terms of the steel donkey, the heart man, all of these supernatural type of things, Baku, all these things that growing up, your grandparents would have you sitting at their feet on the nights when there was no electricity and it was storytelling time. Stories. Where have our stories gone? In part, and they are part of passing on that 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 knowledge. Do you see in your communities as you go around any moves to engage our elderly population in putting them in positions where they can pass on this knowledge in an informal way to the communities within which they live?
I can jump on and say no. And I think that one of the reasons why, okay, I don't want to necessarily put everything on COVID, because the world was moving before COVID. Before COVID, I can't necessarily say that these were things that I observed within any community that I would have been able to touch base with. Um, with regards to grandparents, I would say, again, I'm speaking from experience or shared experience. The grandparents of today are not the grandparents of yesteryear. The grandparents of today are more hit and, like, let's say, up to the time. So where we would have had grandparents. And when I talk about grandparents, there's the image that goes with a grandparent that if
Mhm.
you and that's a grandparent of today is like use a grandparent. You could be like 16, so we're not gonna get the same teachings. We're not gonna get the same information being shared because they're not at the same um, level or mentally as it was back then. So I'm not casting blame, but that's just the way it is. And with regards to getting no present day, with regards to getting said grandparents out and about into the community, I think that COVID has kind of put a stamp on that because children don't want their grandparents or their mothers or anybody who could possibly share information going out to get sick. That is the fear. So fear has kind of crippled us in a way that the information that could have been easily given is now coming quote unquote at a cost where it could possibly be our lives or the life of our loved ones, and we have to find a way to maneuver around that so that we can still be able to share in these experiences.
I think, Keisha, you've hit the nail on the head, but I'll put this to you. What we are doing now is the perfect opportunity to have those conversations or those teaching sessions done without endangering anyone, really. And so I would dare say that again, because of COVID, and it's forced us to find other methods of engaging, even in teaching, that we now have a blueprint of which we can use to get these programs that you're talking about done and have primary school, secondary school, university students engage with those older people. Now, I do know that the Ministry of Education has started to draft a syllabus for heritage in primary schools and secondary schools. So I believe that there's some work being done there. I know for sure that they're also looking at the practices of things like the landship and other things like that. So I think we're beginning to put those things in place. But I think we also have to use the technology of today so that we can reach as wide a group of people as humanly possible. And I always say that when we're doing these things, we must always remember that we have a diaspora of whom we should never forget that they exist, because they're going to be part and parcel of helping to carry the heritage and the culture to the lands where they live and for their offspring also. Tiffany, it's over to you.
I want to add to you before you pass on to Tiffany, Senator King. I just
Yep.
want to add to that real quick. Even though I understand that we have been creative in finding ways to share this information, I gonna be honest. The platform that we're currently using kind of takes away from the whole experience of if it was in person. And I trust me, I understand that we have to be able to utilize both entities provided to us, but
Mhm.
like I'm telling you, I test online and it was the hardest thing. You got people that when you're standing in front of the camera, like you don't craft. So for me, after a while trying to say, okay, so not my right, your right, I just say, okay, whichever arm you want to do, because it's totally different as being in person. In person, I can stand in front of you and there is that model that you can mimic. There's the reflective mode that if I say right, then we all know we're going to the right because right is right. Don't care where. When we're at on this platform, it makes it a little bit more challenging. But like I said, I do understand. Sorry. I
All right,
mean, we
there you
got
hear
adaptability. It's about
it. Of
adaptability,
course,
but
I hear you. Understood. Understood. But we've got to, under the circumstances, I'm still a pure believer that you use whatever is at your disposal to get the job done. Tiffany?
Yes, please. I am very excited to hear about the syllabus because my recommendation was to introduce another day. So, from my understanding and experience, the only time the schools within Barbados celebrate heritage and culture is on Independence Day. And in my opinion, this is not sufficient. I suggest that along with Independence, there's also a day to celebrate the heritage and culture of Barbadians. Hence, on this day, all students should be involved. So, for example, we can give them a theme in respect to heritage and culture. And as you just mentioned, the importance of folklore, I would love to hear schools doing, especially theater art students, creating by themselves folklore and acting it out. And this way, they will learn about their culture, they will learn about their heritage, learn about what these characters symbolize for Barbados. And also, business students will have the opportunity to create businesses surrounding culture. And this is something that they can leave school with. So, as I agree with everybody, it starts from targeting the youth from a very young age.
That gives me a good segue into my next question for everyone. I'm going to start with Sophia on this one. What would you say to a young person to encourage them to get involved in the heritage sector, be it from business or just from an educational standpoint, or a cultural practitioner, anything like that? What would you say to someone young?
First, I am asking them to be themselves and give of their best. Listen, and for sure, they will do a good job. Be yourself.
Keisha?
I would encourage them to align themselves with a um, community groups. There's no fee attached, so you don't have the burden of worrying about financial stuff. You show up, and you show up with an open mind. You show up hungry, because we need people more hungry for the culture. I I would say you need to be starving for it. To learn, to become a sponge and take up everything. Like you said, Senator John, the NCF offers, there are certain programs that are offered to the community. Find yourself in something that you are enthused about, and even if you're not enthused about it and it's something that you're like, oh, try it, because you might like it, you might take a liking to it. It does not even have to be something that you absolutely love, but if it is something that you absolutely love, then you need to submerge yourself in that aspect of it, that you can learn everything you need to learn and be the best, so that you could flourish on your own.
Nice. Tiffany?
Yes, please. And as you were saying earlier about technology, we live in a time now where it's all about adventure. We have YouTubers, we have vloggers, we have creators, and many others, and it only takes a spark to get the fire going. There's a lot of adventure. For me personally, when I joined the culture division, I can say that there's a lot of adventure and fun in getting to know about your heritage and culture. I personally just learned how to use the old telephone. Additionally, I randomly explored Spice Town for the first time recently. I walked on the pier, I took pictures of the mural, and I ate at a Beijing-owned restaurant. And then I created a vlog. So not only to young people, but organizations also have a part in getting the young people to become involved. Do treasure hunts, do activities. The youth are actually willing to get involved, and the youth are actually willing to get involved. It's just getting the information out there that there are groups that you can join to do stuff. And also, again, social media plays a huge part. Start Instagram challenges. So for example, around Heritage Month, do Instagram challenges. There are a lot of creatives who are just willing to get a piece of the pie. So that is what this is why I would encourage young persons and also organizations to get involved in heritage.
All right. So, guys, you've just opened up another question, which is from listening to Tiffany, from listening to you, Keisha, and listening to you, Sophia, there seems to be business opportunities within the heritage sector that young people, not so young people, old people, that anyone, even established businesses, can get involved in. From each of you, could you just give me one thing that you think they can use from our heritage for a business opportunity? I'll start with Sophia.
Right away, I was thinking about our basket making. A lot of basket making, weaving goes on at Pelican. And if you could just get young people to have like a basket, a little workshop in the community making baskets right away, we can have young people using that as a business to make money. And at Haynesville, we don't only just do dance, and we do personal development training and stuff. And we had a basket weaving workshop. So that is a way that we can make some money. So basket making is it.
Keisha, thank you, Sophia.
I would say painting, um, painting the buildings, and almost like having, if you have a building that has gone through ruins, or you knew what it looked like before, then you have stages of, this is what it looked like, this is what it is now, and then at the end the restoration, so that you give people a timeline of
Mm-hmm.
of of what happened. Also hiking, you can take people on tracks through rough terrain. That's a way to
Gullies.
tap into that financial area as well.
All right. Tiffany?
Yes, we normally see items and people selling cultural stuff in stores. So my advice is to start to create your graphic design, start to create your baskets, and go on the side of the road and sell your stuff. Like, I don't think that we should have to walk in a mall to see these things on display. Start to make it a norm that as soon as you walk out your house, somebody's doing a basket, selling baskets, somebody's selling a shaped map of Barbados, and then there's also the old maps. So there's a lot of creative items that we have put away. I can remember in the expo, I went and I saw how the old maps were created. So start to go back to learning about the old technology and the old items. So that is another way that business can bloom it as it relates to heritage and culture.
Well, I've been fortunate as the then Minister of Culture to see some young people getting into things like comics and novels and using Barbariana, the language, using like Sophia mentioned, you don't see things like Hartman and all these things. And all of these things they were putting them into comics. And I know for sure that a number of them have won awards outside of Barbados, doing this thing, using things that are part of our culture and part of our heritage. But I've also seen people using iconic buildings like Parliament and the rocks at Bashiba and the other things to do pictures and put them on T-shirts and different things for merchandising and stuff. And for me, these are some of the things that you can do. But then there's some sayings. Like for instance, when we tell the story of Coffee and the rebellion, there's the perfect thing people always talk about. If you roast me today, you can't roast me tomorrow. And if you go into the United States, who is probably one of the best places that utilize these types of things, if that was there, you probably see people in T-shirts. If you roast me today, you can't roast me tomorrow. And as I think it was Keisha who made the point earlier, it was Tiffany, that these things bring out curiosity. Then it gives you the opportunity to tell your story, to talk more about yourselves and your history and your culture and these other things. And I've had the opportunity being in the African American Museum I had the opportunity to explain to some people who were there looking at things with myself about Shirley Chisholm and her connection to Barbados, and how Barbadian governors were important in South and the Carolinas in terms of managing it and this type of thing. So we've got a lot of things that we have that we can use. But guys, we're almost out of time. It's 7:15. I want to thank you. I do. We have 10 more minutes. Okay. All right. 10 more minutes. Let's talk a little bit more then about what you guys have experienced in Heritage Month 2022. I start with you, Tiffany. What has your experience
Yes,
been like being involved?
I am an action person. Therefore, Heritage Month has been a great experience for me. I, however, do wish that more persons were made aware. Heritage Month has helped me to grow a deep love for heritage and culture, for the conservation of heritage, and for the beauty of our growing culture. At this point, my grandparents' mouth are probably tired as I have been consistently asking them and questioning them about their childhood and old times, and even challenging them to identify old pictures of Bridgetown and compare it to the present one, and also asking them questions. Grandfather, Granny, what is this antique? What did you guys use this for? So and I also enjoy doing the questionnaires, interacting with the old and young, seeing how people face will light up when they're speaking about how far we've come, especially the freedom part, but most importantly, the opportunities it has afforded to me and the experiences. And I do look forward to continue to work with the Division of Culture. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and we do appreciate you being there with us. It has been an absolute pleasure. Sophia?
I am so glad for Heritage Month. I was like, when is this a first? Is this a new initiative? It brought back Emancipation Roots experience, something that is really close to my heart and dear to my heart, where you get to showcase, our African fashion in the royal family, a sense of royalty, educate people. But it was like a snippet. It was small, so we
Mm-hmm.
couldn't really do much. But the thing is that Emancipation Roots Experience Show is one of the things that is kind of a discipline. It's not just for persons to put on costume and model. They learn more about the African countries. They learn all types of, different materials and so on. The other thing is that for Heritage Month, there was movie night. And at movie night, um, it was interesting because they showed us more about Barbados. They talk about the Newton burial ground and the different things that we use, like fufu. They talk about the palm oil, and it was really
Mm-hmm.
interesting for me. But what really jumped out at me for the movie night when we talk about our heritage was a place called Sweet Bottom. So we went back
Yes.
in time to
St. George.
educate the Barbadian public about, the reason why this particular gap had the name and those type of things. And they had loved that. Also, I took a tour of Rock Hall, and the history behind Rock Hall was very, 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 very informative for me. We walked through. There was lots of vegetation and lots of fruit trees. And the reasoning behind it is, and there were still families from that period to now. And there was a reason behind that kitchen garden um, setting at Rock Hall, because it was something that was passed down through that Freedom Village. And I don't mean where the statue is currently located, but I mean
Fire
it's
Hill.
the, yes, Fire Hill.
Yes.
And between the gullies, we have a lot of gullies there, and the view, and between the church and how Barbadians are so, God fearing, and there are many churches in that very small knit community.
Yes.
So
Yes.
the fact that we have the heritage tours. It really was meaningful, and it will help sustain, Barbados.
Thank you, Sophia. I'm glad you enjoyed that particular aspect. You know, one of the things that I always tell people wherever they are in the world, Barbados has a lot of churches, but it also has a lot of rum shops that you can find. Wherever you find a church, you will find a rum shop too. So, Keisha, over to you.
Thank you. For me, it was the antique market. Just being in that space with people who were obviously older than me, and embracing what was close to their heart. Um, it was a beautiful space to be in. I saw restoration or a rocking chair. My grandmother got a rocking chair, and that brought back memories for me. I remember rocking in that chair till the cows come home, and it was just rocking. And your grandparents don't want you to break the legs because then they gotta carry it to get fixed. So that brought back memories for me. And then we had a lady by the name of Anne-Marie who came the entire back of the chair, and then I went to ask for information on how she got started. It was forthcoming. Like nothing was. I didn't have to question whether she enjoyed what she was doing or if she wanted to give me information. But the demeanor of everybody in the space who had a slot was very, very warming. I also saw a lot of things that I'm like, okay, so this is what they used to boil the water in, and I mean, for me, they look foreign. Even though I grew up with my grandparents, it was still a little foreign to me. And I appreciated that the people who came into the space were so intrigued by what they saw, and they bought them. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, so we can do that? Like, I'm eager to know, like, what are you going to do with this item? So for me, that whole atmosphere, that it was a beautiful thing. I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed it.
Well, guys, we're getting close to that time when we have to say bye-bye. But I want to leave you with this. You know, when we talk about heritage, I've kind of like dedicated my life to bringing people together. One of the things that I want Barbadians to be able to do is to realize that we are the sum total of all of the people who call Barbados home. And so I'm going to put a plea out there now for persons to get out, visit the Jewish synagogue, a Muslim mosque. Just if you look at that as part of our religious heritage, a Hindu temple, a Baha'i place, whatever it is, visit it, meet someone, get to know more about their religions and the different things that they use as part of their morals and standards and other things like that. I'm also going to ask Barbadians to get out there and support those people who we will consider to be the First Nation, the indigenous people of this island. We have, at the last estimate, about 100 persons on this island. How many of us know anything much about their cooking techniques? How do they use cassava? How do they use sweet potatoes to make wine? What do we know? These are things I think that are very important in terms of us being able to bring everybody together. When you talk about putting in sauce, you can talk about something, I think it's either coming from Ireland or Scotland, called haggis. How does that um, factor in to the production of putting in sauce? Are you going to St. John and we talk about people, I don't like using these terms, but we call people red legs and different things like that. How many of us have even a friend who is there? And what do we know about their contributions to Barbados and to its development? These are things that heritage studies, history, and all of this, these are the things that will make us stronger as a nation. We all took the opportunity to learn a bit more about each other's unique heritage, which forms the basis of who we are as a people today. I want to take this opportunity to thank you, Tiffany, to thank you, Keisha, to thank you, Sophia, to thank Sharon Johnson in the Division of Culture for putting this all together, and for those millions of people in the diaspora and elsewhere who have been online with us this evening. I thank you for being with us. I simply want to say this was fantastic. I enjoyed it to the max. Ladies, you did a good job. You represented. The only thing I'm going to ask is that next time we want to see some young men also in this chat so that we make sure we're embracing everybody. But on behalf of the Division of Culture, we want to say thank you for being with us this evening. I hope you found this enjoyable and informative. May God bless you all. Good evening and goodbye.
Our Bridgetown jewel in our crown, worldwide renowned, from Garrison to Kensington. This meeting place, this melting pot, this entry point for the builders of our nation. Historic Bridgetown and its garrison. Big it up. Our military, we celebrate for centuries of history.